I did test that one with the marsupial pouch. Everyone thought I was on an e-bike. Like everyone.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
I'd be fast on it, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, well you got a motor."
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Velo podcast. I'm your host, Mike Levy, and today I've got tech editors Alvin Holbrook and Josh Ross with me. Now, last show we had Will Tracy with us. Will is probably on a plane right now on his way to Australia to cover the tour down under. So we're going to talk to him either later in the week or maybe the week after. We're going to get some updates. But today we've got a pretty interesting show. Now, if you listened last week, we talked about our best rides of 2024, and it was, guys, I would say it was very uplifting. I came away feeling positive and like I was ready to go out and do some adventures and all of that. But today...
Did you go do any adventures, Levy?
I mean, I spent at least an hour on Zwift, which just really counts as too much of an adventure.
It's
cold here, Alvin. It's
Spent
cold.
time exploring the McCurry Islands, huh? There you go.
Exactly, yeah. I got bored of Watopia. I had to go somewhere else. Today, though, we are going to take a completely different direction and talk about rides that didn't go well, because a lot of times, well, at least sometimes they don't, sometimes the weather doesn't work. Sometimes the bike breaks. Sometimes you have a biomechanical and you end up shitting behind a bush for 2 hours in the rain. It's whatever, really. And to do that, we're going to talk to Alvin and Josh. But first, Josh, this is your first time on the show. Where are you?
It is my first time on the show. I'm very excited about it. I'm in Portland, Oregon. It is not quite as cold here, but plenty wet and cold enough that I'm on Zwift most of the time these days.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. What are you riding mostly in Portland? Are you mixing your time between road bikes and gravel bikes? What are you up to down there?
So I generally ride a road bike, and the thing is, I'm always like, oh, I love riding gravel, and I have a great gravel bike, and I ride that just as much, except I really don't. I prefer road, and the thing that I actually prefer is pedaling my bike. So I don't really much care if it is road or gravel or what. I'm not so into single tracky technical gravel stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. So Josh, later on in the show, we're going to talk about some coaching you did. You didn't do it with a coach. Well, you did do it with a coach, didn't you? Except it wasn't a real coach. It was an AI coach. Last week, we talked about the UAE Emirates team using a supercomputer for their AI coaching. I don't think you have a supercomputer, but I am interested to hear about that later on in the show, how that's gone.
I mean, I heard you guys chatting about the supercomputer a little bit, and I do have a MacBook Pro here, so it could be the same thing, really.
No excuses then, right? You should be going pro this year.
No excuses at all.
Josh, just before we move on, when you are out there just training your balls off, listening to this coach tell you what to do, what's in your headphones? I'm curious.
Oh, the poppier the better. I want oh my God, I don't even know that. There's a song called 1035 I was listening to at the end of a Zwift race yesterday. Just like poppy, clubby, I would be embarrassed to listen to it in any other situation, but I'm like, yeah, more.
By Tate McRae and Tiesto, huh?
Yes, that's it. Thank you for looking that up.
Okay.
Is it just Sandstorm on repeat?
Yeah. It's just
during your Zwift race?
Yeah, perfect.
Alvin, how are you, and what have you been listening to in your headphones when you ride?
Unfortunately, I listen to a lot of politics podcasts. I listen to the NPR politics podcast a lot. I listen to
Bring
Today
that shit
Explained.
here.
Yeah, I know. As far as music, though, I have been listening to a lot. Recently, I've been listening to, in my 10 things that I love in 2024, my favorite album was actually a mixtape from Florida-based rapper Doechii, Alligator Bites Never Heal. Really like that. There's a song called Nissan Altima. If you have a stereotype of what a Nissan Altima does on the road and what it's like, and it fully embraces it. Yeah, I'll leave it there. But more recently, actually, this morning I was listening to The Strokes. I felt inclined to do that. That was weird.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Do you guys ever listen to podcasts when you ride?
Yes.
I do
Yeah.
not.
Josh is just straight sandstorm for
Yeah,
like
I
8
just
hours
want
on
it, like,
Zwift.
1990s
wanted to, like,
Eurovision on repeat
yeah,
is what you're
I,
playing.
I wanted to just like be out there in the ether of just like some sort of beat thing happening, or like I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, like background music while you do
Yeah,
your work, you know? Yeah.
yeah.
That's usually me. Lately, I've been listening to those, I'm sure you guys have heard of this, the telepathy tapes.
I have.
I have
I
not.
haven't
I
listened to
feel
any of
out
it,
of
but
the
I know what you're talking
loop.
about. It's on my list.
My dudes, put it at the top of your list. It's basically about nonverbal autistic children communicating telepathically. It goes so far beyond that, but they're communicating with each other, and like the way they do all these tests and the way they present this, it's my mind is blown. So that's what I've been listening to lately, and I obviously cannot recommend that enough. Check it out.
Because it's entertaining, or because you're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of truth in this. Have you figured that out yet?
Uh, Both. I definitely lean that way. Anybody who knows me knows that I lean towards the woo for sure. I fully embrace the woo all the time. I've known telepathy is real for a long time. 100%. Josh is laughing. Josh's homework. Josh is going to listen to a couple episodes of the telepathy tapes, and then we're going to come back next week and we're going to talk about it because it is insane. Definitely
Right.
listen.
I'm not against.
Yeah.
I just want to put it out there. I am not against the woo.
Yeah.
But I do laugh about the telepathy thing.
For sure. And I think that I do too, or I mean I still do, but I definitely did. And then man, I listened to this and like mind blowing. So anybody that's out there, make some if you got some boring zone 2 hours you guys are needing to do, I recommend telepathy tapes, everybody. But let's get into the news, Alvin. There's a story that got posted. It was either last night or this morning. Basically, the National Cycling League, the NCL, is dead. Can you tell me what the NCL is, what it was supposed to be, and where it's gone and why?
Yeah, it was let's call it the next great professional cycling league in the US, a place that hasn't really had a great cycling league that's taken off in mass. So I was first interested because it was an intersection of like cycling or like bike racing and the NBA, because Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant, two NBA stars that are now on the same team, like both put a lot of money into it. And the NCL got a lot of investments from people outside the cycling industry and cycling community and racing community, but it didn't necessarily get any support from anyone inside of cycling, which I thought was interesting. I mean, it's supposed to capitalize on cycling, which was super popular in 2022. It was supposed to launch in 2022. First season was 2023, and then it got indefinitely suspended in 2024. Basically, it's going to take crit racing, which I think is the most palatable of road racing, because you can just see people go lap by lap.
Especially in America.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fast, it's high stakes. They added like a point system to it. The big thing for me that I thought was interesting was that there was like a component of investing in women's racing, which I think is just like woefully underinvested in like women's sports in general. But they were going to have teams from different cities, just like you would root for your local Phoenix Suns that Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal are on. There would be a version like the Denver Disruptors or the Miami Knights or something like that.
Did they have team names like that?
Yeah.
That actually sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so you could root for your team was the idea, and there would be points counted along the way. There'd be sprint times. If you're a racer, you could sub in and out as well. There would be a bench. But there would be a team of 8 men and a team of 8 women. And the points that both of those teams score get totaled as a team. And so the winning team, like if they were to sweep the series, like win a bunch of the races, the idea was that there was a lot of money. There's something like $700,000 on the line if your team swept the races. Now, that sounds like a lot, but if you have 16 racers and then you have the team support along the way, like $700K along the way,
quick.
like goes pretty quick, even if that is more money in U.S. road racing than in most situations. Yeah, so that was the idea of it. There were, I believe, 3 races in 2023. It was postponed indefinitely in 2024, and then
How was the attendance though for those races, or the coverage too?
sparse.
Yeah.
Sparse. There was a partnership with GCN Plus, so you could actually watch the races on GCN Plus when it existed. RIP GCN Plus, and it was pretty. I mean, that I thought that was pretty exciting because I
Yeah.
could watch people that have, I mean, faces that I vaguely recognize. I could root for teams. Like I thought that was pretty cool, and it was interesting. And the thing was is that like this wasn't technically the first time they've tried an NCL. There was, if I remember correctly, an NCL in the 80s and 90s that never really took off.
Also, crit racing.
Similar, yeah, crit
Okay.
racing. I'm definitely fuzzier on the details, and I'd have to get back to you on that. But similar idea to popularize road racing.
Okay. So why didn't this thing happen? Why didn't it work?
So I've like talked to a couple people about it, and I think there's some just things that need to be dug into, but I think the general consensus is a lot of dysfunction. People went in and out. The original like creators left, I believe, after about a season. The CEO changed at the end of 2023, and that same CEO is who announced that NCL was dead on LinkedIn. And then on the same
That
post,
seems
they're
weird.
like, "Hey, I'm open to opportunities if anyone wants to collaborate on a future job."
Yeah.
Like,
You know, Alvin, this sounds like somebody that we should probably talk to. This guy.
we
I think
gal,
yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah,
gal. Sorry.
yeah,
I think
it's okay.
that would be a an interesting discussion. Like, you know, what actually
We've
happened?
I've we've reached out. We're working on it. We'll
Okay.
see what happens. But basically, there were a lot of people who were left unpaid on those teams, or paid very minimally, and certainly not on time.
Sounds like
Um,
cycling. No?
I think, yeah, it's a common refrain
Fortunately.
in
Yeah.
cycling,
I'm
unfortunately.
fascinated by the idea, though, that it wasn't the basic concept of bike racing in America that failed, it sounds like. It was just badly done.
I don't know, man. Josh, when is the last time you've been to a bike race that wasn't for work?
Yeah, so how about
What about
that?
you,
When we
Levy?
get
See, here's the
Not
thing.
so
Those are
much.
all free. Like the way that I think there's just a general idea of like, how do you make money off of cycling, especially if you're watching. And if you're someone watching the tour, like you don't make money really on the people who are on the side of the road, just the tifosi that are out there. You might make money on someone who like is in a team car or gets a tour or something like that. But if you're going to NCL, or if you're going to your local crit, like, and you want to watch it, you can't. They're not going to charge you $10 or something like that because you're just going to go home.
you, because people watch the Portland Pickles, which is like some sort of
It's different.
baseball thing.
I think that's definitely different, and it's a lot more palatable. And there's a score.
Yeah, that's hard without a score, I suppose.
I think one of the things is it's just another example of America not being that into cycling, to be honest. Like, from the outside, I mean, I've watched lots of crit races and they're excited. There's lots of shit happening. They look scary, all that. But I get the idea, like from the outside, like a series and there's, this and that and there's team names. It sure sounds really cool, but I wonder what they needed for it to be successful. Did they need like 20,000 people watching it at each race, like buying hot dogs and stuff? Or did they need like 20,000, 50,000 online viewers? Or is it a sponsor thing? Like, I don't know.
I mean, you need all of it. You need
Yeah.
concessions. You need like admission. You need sponsorships. You need like broadcast deals to popularize it. I don't really know what the answer is, but as it stands, like I know I'm not like I am watching a lot of the NBA. I'm paying for NBA League Pass, which is a way to watch most games in the NBA. And I mean, I'm not doing that as much for cycling, a sport that I really love, and I'm not going out to see like local races unless it was like in Austin. There's the Driveway Series, and there's a culture behind that.
Yeah.
And there's like an enigmatic leader Chris Tolley, who, I won't say anything there, but like people go out for that because there is a regular place where you can go to every week or every couple weeks. You can see regulars come in and out and race, and it's a place to hang out that's not the local park because it's free.
Yeah. I don't want to sound negative, but like there are many crit races, especially farther down south, where like tons of people come and they show up and there's teams and all this stuff. And like, I know people aren't making tons of money or anything, but like, I don't want to say that's as good as it's going to get, but like, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe cycling's not ever going to have a 20,000 person crowd, at the local crit or whatever. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. Is it esports? Is that the answer?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole other podcast for sure. Yeah.
I don't think
People
so,
don't
but...
seem so into that either.
No. No. Anyways, let's go to gear, Alvin, because there was a new gravel fork. It's from a company called Number 22. This is the same company that released if you guys haven't seen it, it's a 3D printed titanium aero road bike. It's called the Reactor Aero. They did a normal one before. And I don't know the exact price for the frame. It's somewhere between $1 million and $100 million, probably. But the same company just released a carbon fork under their component brand that's number 6, which is, I had to look this up. It's the atomic number of carbon, where 22 is the atomic number of titanium. So that's where the name comes from.
Nice job.
Then they just released an adventure fork. It's an adventure fork. What makes a fork adventure ready? Tell me, please.
It's got little zits on it, so you can mount your cute little bags on it and that type of thing. Honestly, there are tens of us that would be excited about this adventure fork, and I count myself as one of them.
I think it's neat.
Yeah. So here's the idea. If you've wanted to carry stuff on your carbon gravel bike or whatever modern gravel bike you have, if you want to carry stuff on your fork, which I like to do personally, this gives you a way of doing it because the length of it, the axle to crown measurement, isn't really any different than most current gravel bikes, certainly if it's not suspension corrected or something like that. However, it does have more tire clearance than your average gravel bike fork. Not enough, but it'll fit a 700 by 50, which is about a 2-inch or 2.1 tire. I think the things that are really cool about it, so it's got the 3-pack mounts. It also has fender mounts. It also allows for both fully internal as well as semi-internal cable routing. So if you're on like a specialized crux, for example, and you have the external cables that route through the fork leg and down to the brake, you can do that. It's got dynamo routing, which I think is really sweet and uncommon. And it's $525, which I think is pretty reasonable when you consider that number 22 is, typically pretty high end because it's custom titanium.
Yep. Yeah. I think I like the fact that it looks a little different. It has that kind of square look to it. And then they have that, the badge on the fork leg. I mean,
yeah,
it's a
that's cool.
fork. Like how different could it be?
Well.
Yeah, but at least it looks a little different. Like I said, 50 mil tire clearance seems weird because I look at a lot of these guys that are adventuring and, they're running 55s up front.
Yeah.
I run a 55 up front. But that's a pretty big tire too. But I mean, if you're adventuring and you've got like your 3-liter Nalgene bottles strapped to your fucking fork legs, I think you'd want a big old tire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I would say so. And the other thing with that Stigmata, if I remember correctly, the axle to crown length is pretty similar on your bike. It's in that like 400 mil range or 420 or something like that. So
yeah, so they could put it on, you could put it on a bike and it's a rigid fork, but you could put it on your bike, but it doesn't completely mess up the handling if the bike has been suspension corrected, is how I read it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at your Stigmata, the current 3rd gen Stigmata. The length is 430 millimeters. So that's 30 mil longer than this one. So you've got a little bit more vertical room to play with. So I was wrong there. But it could be that they're maxing out at 50 mil, but there are a lot of gravel bikes that only fit like a 42. I'm looking at like a Cervelo Aspero or Aspero, for example. You could put this on there. You won't mess with the geometry and it becomes a whole lot more usable.
Yeah.
This is a total tangent, but there's this idea in gravel circles that like everyone is running crazy big tires because people like Dylan Johnson are talking about it, which is like, yeah, that's cool. That's innovative. But I think it really ignores the people who just have a bike that they bought a couple years ago for a reasonable price. And they're maxing out at like 40, 45. Like, I think that is a huge part of the market. And we can't forget that as we talk about gravel stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It does it makes sense as an upgrade for a lot of people that don't need most people don't need a suspension fork but just need way more tire clearance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk about AI coaching. Last week, Jim wrote a story about the UAE team using a supercomputer and an AI coach, and it all sounded like science fiction to me. And then Alvin tells me that you've been using an AI coach as well. And the article just went up. So I have a whole bunch of questions. I think my first question is, why? Have you used a normal coach, a human coach first, actually?
Yes. Okay. So it's sort of a weird thing in my job, right? Like, do I use a coach or do I not use a coach? Part of the problem is they're always like, what's the most important thing when you're training is this like simple consistency, right? You do things that are kind of the same. So I'm like, oh, well, actually, I'm on 8 different bikes and I'm flying to different places and like, it's so hard to have that sort of consistency. But I did work with a coach a couple years ago who, at the time, I had continued my normal sort of my base on a Sunday long ride is about 100 miles. I always call it 100-ish. And I did that all through the winter. And, after that, I was like, I'm tired and this sucks and I hate everything. So I worked with a coach a little bit
Who would have thought?
like, yeah, who was like, hey, like you need to go up and down during the year. And like, it's fine to ride a little less in the winter. And it's like, and it was a very simple, like structure of just a way to keep things, like palatable.
One quick question or a statement, actually. Isn't it funny? So I needed the exact same thing. The last year I did use a coach, but what it turned out is I just needed somebody to tell me to not ride my bike sometimes, or to tell me to ride my bike. It's funny how we just need like a little bit of guidance like that. It seems so obvious, but like we get in our heads that we just need to go there and do this, but like it's pretty counterproductive. So anyways, keep going.
Yeah, so that was my experience with an actual coach. And then I think you were asking, so why the AI coach? I mean, to some extent, it's because my job is to try cool things. But also, the thing that I found, the place where it sort of fits in is that, and I should say, I feel a little old when I interact with AI just in general. I'm like, what is this weird future tech and how do I do this? So I'm always like, right, it's hard for me to engage a little bit with AI stuff in general. But what I found where it works really well is that you're already self-motivated. Like, I already want to be faster and ride harder and do all the things. But I don't really want to work with a paid human coach all the time. It feels sort of unnecessary because I mostly know what I'm doing. And the AI just lets me ask a little bit of question here and there. Hey, I'm feeling really tired. Can I move this workout to this? Hey, what if I do this stupid thing? Like, I know it's a rest day, but I want to do this Zwift race. Like, can we move things around? And you can ask these little questions.
Interesting. So what was your goal going into this thing? Because if you're anything like me, I'm just making wild assumptions here, but like, I don't necessarily race my bike a whole bunch, but I just want to be like a strong cyclist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's really tricky. What is my goal? So I ran into this all the time. I get on, like, especially when I worked with the coach, he's like, well, so what's your goal? And I'm like, well, I want to do these 2 wildly different things. On the one hand, if it's a 30-mile ride, I do not want to get dropped. And in fact, I want to hurt people a little bit. Like I'm not going to be the fastest, but I want them when they go like, ooh, Josh is coming. I want them to be like, On the other side, I want to finish a 500K in one shot ride in 2025. That is a wildly different training system from like those two things do not come together. So to go back to your original question, what was my goal for the AI coach was, well, I'm gonna try to forget those different goals. And what I've noticed is that over the years, I tend to get down to, I don't know, 225, 235 FTP like now. And then I get up to 250, 260 in like August, the end of summer, right? And it just doesn't like, yeah. And that's okay. That's
Coaster.
expected. But
Yeah.
can I get up? Can I bump it a little faster and then go a little farther? Like if I get to 250 2 months earlier and then go to 260, 270 at the end of the summer? That'd be cool.
So, 8 weeks was the program length, and you are how far through
that's
it?
halfway. So
Halfway, okay.
It's a 16-week program, and then you could like extend that also, but like it's your basic program is 16 weeks, and 8 weeks. I wrote the article at 8 weeks. There's some sort of behind the scenes reasons for that, which is like it's very difficult to carry through an idea for a long period of time in terms of the content we're creating. So like 16 weeks, like to think back of what you did at the beginning of that and like figure all that out. It's just really, it's difficult. Plus, once the weather gets nicer, I'll start getting pulled into press stuff and doing things. But the other reason that I did it after 8 weeks is that you get a real sense of how the program is going and what it's doing. And then it's really like the reality is it's about to ramp up. Like I've understood the program, I've built some base, and now the next 8 weeks are really gonna
kick your ass.
Gonna kick my ass. And also, I should be honest about the fact that it's a whole lot easier to say after 8 weeks nothing has really changed, and then after 16 weeks at the end of the program when you're supposed to be stronger and faster, the stakes are maybe a little higher.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sorry, what is this program? I just want for the people who are
we didn't
unfamiliar.
actually say what it was or
yeah,
how much
you
it
didn't,
cost.
and it's not Trainer Road.
No, it's not Trainer Road. So Trainer Road, I'm gonna take a tangent on that because Trainer Road, I'm always like, that is not AI. Maybe I'm just old, but that is like data analysis, and it is incredibly good at what Trainer Road like. No, nothing disparaging about Trainer Road. I love Trainer Road.
Let them cook with the definition of AI. Everybody's playing it fast and loose right now. Let them cook. They've been doing it.
So
anyways,
you say just go with it.
It's marketing. Yeah. So what is the program that you're using?
So it's called Coach Cat, and it's a fairly small company, really. And they haven't been around all that long in terms of like people wouldn't know their names a couple of years ago. And yeah, this is a good, like, I should go back to the beginning with the explanation a little bit, which is, and this stuff is in the article, and I had to sort of figure it out along the way. But for those tuning in now, the basic idea here is you've got a really solid traditional training program, and then on top of that, you have this AI coach that you can ask questions to.
Yeah, and this is by Fast Cat Coaching, right?
It is by Fast Cat Coaching.
Yep.
How much does it cost?
So it's $210 for the year, I believe, which is exactly the same as Trainer Road, essentially. It's all the same.
That seems pretty reasonable. That's like a month with a human, isn't it?
Yeah.
roughly speaking.
Yeah,
Give or
it's
take a
very
bit.
reasonable. It's competitive with any of the other sort of software programs that you would use. It costs a little more if you pay monthly instead of yearly, but like it's right in there, competitive with everything.
How is it different than the Trainer Road AI? Because from my very uneducated surprise, I don't know anything about AI. What I read is that AI is really just scraping the internet for information. It's not actually intelligent. You know what I mean? So how is Coach Cat different from the AI on Trainer Road? Not to pick on Trainer Road, but just how do they interact differently?
Yeah, so it's really hard. This is a rabbit hole of many things. And one of the things that it's a rabbit hole is how you test FTP. And the reason that I talk about that is because TrainerRoad, part of their big AI thing is that you don't have to do an FTP test anymore. And yeah,
I like it. I'm going there.
yeah. So, and the thing about Trainer, and there's a lot of services that do, that check your FTP in other ways. And this could be a whole another podcast, but I have done a lot of testing on it. And for me, it is almost perfectly accurate to do either the ramp test or, any of the systems that just pull your FTP from regular writing. But here's the thing about what TrainerRoad is doing in terms of AI is TrainerRoad has this big user base, and they are looking at all the data from all these users, and they're looking at when they assign a workout to people, are people finishing it? And then at the end of those workouts, you report how it felt to you, and they're looking at that data and they're comparing back and forth, and then they're saying like, okay, so we have all this historic data about FTP testing. And then how does that compare to this new AI FTP testing? And then if we guess somebody's FTP, how does that then, what's the feedback from them? Are the workouts doable? Are they too hard? Like, what does all the data say? And that's why I'm a little like, is that really AI? Because they're doing comparative data analysis, and it's incredible. Like, what they're doing is really amazing. But it's not quite the same as what Coach Cat is doing, where you have like a large language model that you can actually talk to.
That was my next question. Is at the start, you said you could just ask it what it thinks, like if you want to change a training plan. So I've worked with a coach last winter, and that exact situation, anybody who's worked with a coach knows, like that exact situation comes up all the time. Like maybe you're not feeling it today. You don't feel like doing 9 hours of zone 2 or whatever, or like an FTP test. And you know what you have to do then? You either have to call them up or text them or email them or whatever. But with Coach Cat, you can just ask the thing. So it sounds like in a way it saves you dealing with that interaction. It just answers for you right away.
So I put this in the article, and this is my big example of like the breakthrough when I was like, oh wow, this is like crazy. And I know people that are more into AI are going to laugh that I think this is that crazy, but whatever. I think it's crazy.
We don't know anything about AI here.
I think it's crazy. So I had an interval workout. The plan I'm doing is like sweet spot stuff, which anyone that's done sweet spot it's like, it feels like sort of this balance between you can do it and you want to die. And it's not
you
quite,
can maintain.
You can maintain, but VO2, for me at least, VO2 max stuff is actually like easier because you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's over. And then with sweet spot, it's just like, it just goes on and you're like, I can't do it. But then you can, and it's just, it's torture. But so I'm doing this plan, and it's like, I had like long sweet spot intervals that day assigned, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then I had done a 5.5 hour Zwift ride on the Sunday before. This was a Tuesday.
Dude,
and
that is too much on Zwift, you fucking psycho. Stop.
It's ridiculous.
I'm both impressed and worried.
Touch grass, dude.
So,
literally, please. Even if it is wet.
It was the Uber pretzel. And for those that do or do not know, the end of that ride, so you ride for like 4 hours, however you want to ride, and it's up and it's down and it's whatever. And then the last hour is up to Zwift. So you just climb for an hour or more. And because of those reactions that you guys just gave me, I was sort of trolling, sort of interacting on Threads. And I was like live tweeting, like it was like 2010, maybe 2007. I don't know.
Yeah,
was that a thing? But whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing. And, you know, towards the end, I started being like, oh my God, Alp to Zwift is so hard. And then I was like, am I going to make it in an hour? Because usually, like, that's sort of a random thing that people try to do. And I don't usually have a ton, like a real hard time making it in an hour. But I started posting like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And there was like some back and forth. And people, you know, the nature of Threads or Twitter, but people started picking it up, and they were like, "Oh, you can do it. Like, don't worry if you don't make an hour. Like, you can train more." And because I'm a vain jerk,
We all are.
I was like, no, like I didn't respond with like, "Oh, thank you." I responded with like, "No, really, like I can do it in an hour. It's fine. I've been riding for 4 hours." Like,
Yeah.
so, but then I was like, okay, when was the last time? So I had done Alp de Zwift something like 30 times. And I was like, well, when was the last time I did it in an hour? Because like, that's like an FTP test. You got to really like put yourself in that headspace. So then on Tuesday, I had this sweet spot interval and I just didn't want to do it. And so I asked the AI, I said, hey, Coach Cat, instead of doing my interval, can I do a sub 60-minute ascent of Alp de Zwift? And I didn't give it any context. I didn't I didn't define anything. I just asked it like a person. And it was like, yes, that would be an excellent swap for your interval today. And in order to do that, you would have to be at like this, this is why it sort of fits your sweet spot thing. And it just understood it. And that to me is like future tech, mind-blowing craziness.
Did it prescribe like a specific output that you needed to do or anything like that in doing
Well,
Alp de
no,
Zwift?
because I had asked it from the beginning. I had set the question as I want to do it in under 60 minutes. Now,
Oh, okay.
I later know because when like a few weeks later, I had the 20-minute FTP test, and I hadn't done a 20-minute FTP test in a while. And so I asked it to help me with pacing, and it did. And so I could have asked it on Alp de Zwift, like, how do I pace that effort? I didn't because it just wasn't on my mind. I didn't really need it, and I was already doing it. But
What are the interactions with the coach, with this AI coach? Like, I assume like you type it in, I feel like I'm asking stupid questions. Does it like speak to you or does it type back? Does it have a voice?
It's all text-based.
Okay.
Although I suppose you could hook it up to like, I use Google Gemini. So, right, I could have Gemini read that back to me, and I have like a 90s Portlander that's reading it to me, a woman.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know personally, like I respond best for when the coach like talks down to me and like, calls me a piece of shit. So I'm just wondering, like, could you like select like Chad the asshole coach and it like changes its complete demeanor, because certain people do respond differently. Some people need to be hugged, some people need to be punched in the ribs. Just whatever.
So in my review, I was a little like wishy-washy on whether you could do that. And the reason is like the backstory is that when I was doing the research on like the final write-up, I found a discussion on Reddit where people were talking about the fact that you could change the personality of the AI. And I was like, really? And
that sounds cool.
So the sort of base level of the AI is very positive, and it reminds me a little bit of the Strava AI, which everyone is making fun of, right? Like,
yeah.
It's just like, yeah, you can do it. And
rainbows and kittens.
Yeah, it's rainbows and kittens. And the sort of base level of it is like when you just if you just do a ride that ignores their thing, like on a rest day, if you go out and just kill yourself, and it's like, hey, that Whammy wasn't the best. Are you sure you can do tomorrow's thing? And like, do you want to? And it's pretty nice. But I did check with the CEO of Coach Cat, and you can request different personalities. So if you want it to be mean to you, apparently you can do it.
Now I'm interested. I think I might. It sounds like reasonably priced. This isn't an ad for these people, but it sounds like something that I should be trying for sure. A couple more questions.
I had to say in the video, like, hey, this isn't sponsored. And so I'll take the opportunity to say something about that. The reality is that I can only test one training program per season, basically, right? Like I have to like go all in. I can't be like doing two different things or neither of them will. So I had to just pick one. This one captured my, it seemed interesting to me. So I went with it.
You know what? I think the answer to that is not that we didn't do this and not that I'm giving any bosses any ideas. They're not going to listen to this anyway. But like we should each do like a different training program, and then we could come back and I'm not doing a training program, but we could each do a different training program and then come back and compare, what it was like and how we felt about it. I think that might be interesting.
Yeah,
Not that
might
we're
be
going to do it,
interesting.
but yeah. A few more questions before we move on. First, if somebody has never worked with a coach before, would you recommend to them that this is a good place to start, or would you say you'd be better off doing a more traditional thing with a human?
So I don't think it's about whether you've worked with a coach or not. What I really think is when you interact with a human, there's like this level of nuance and also support and like therapy, right? You talk to a coach and they're like, you can do this. And they like instill confidence in you. Like a good coach will be like, okay, I see your goals. I understand them. I have helped people with this before, and we are going to get there. Believe in me, follow these things as much as you can, and we will shift and adapt as necessary. And we got this, right? And you're not going to get that from an AI. What you're going to get from an AI is very like, can I do this differently? Can I do this today instead of this? Like, they're very specific questions. So I think that you need to be self-motivated. But in terms of whether you've worked with a coach or not, I don't think it matters that much. It's just like there are things you could do where you can't ask questions. And there are things that are actually crazy complicated. And this is simpler than that. It's like the very basic touching on working with a coach. So you've got a solid training plan. You just want to be able to ask some questions here and there, and you're already self-motivated. That's who I would say this works well for.
Okay. All right. We're going to check back in on this because you're going to complete the program, I assume. So we're going to see if you turn into a superhuman. No pressure, though.
So I think it actually hit the cutting room floor, as it were. But in my video, I had originally scripted out that I was going to say that I was going to promise to check back into the written review and update it if I gained significant FTP.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to let you off the hook though, because I am going to ask you about this later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on. We're not going to talk about our worst, most challenging rides of 2024 yet, because we are going to talk about what you guys are currently riding and what we can expect to see on the website soon. Alvin, you've been riding an Orbea Orca, the 6th generation.
7th.
7th generation.
Yeah.
Jeez. I'm just trying to keep up. Is this the road, like the normal Aero, or sorry, is this the normal version or is this the Aero version that has that like weird marsupial pouch storage thing down at the bottom bracket?
No marsupial pouch to be found here. This one's like lean and mean, and it kind of takes away basically every accoutrement you could have on a bike. It's just kind of round tubes and a flat top tube. So,
and you like it?
I did test that one with the marsupial pouch. Everyone thought I was on an e-bike. Like everyone.
So I was going to say, yeah.
I'd be fast on it, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, well you got a motor." It's in my legs, sir. Come on.
So, sorry, Alvin. We're going to change directions here. Josh, that storage pouch on the bottom there, I haven't really looked into this at all. So these are like genuine questions. So the storage pouch, it's like a separate piece that comes off of the frame?
Yeah, because it's not UCI legal. It actually makes the bike faster.
Cool.
You're not allowed to have fairings per the UCI, so it just pops off.
What can you fit in there?
Like your flat repair stuff.
Alvin, tell me about the normal one. You liked it? It looks like an all-round kind of thing.
Yeah, I had to reckon with it a little bit because I thought I was going to love it. I had spec'd it out in a way that I was like, oh, if I wanted to buy this, I could afford to buy it. So I got Ultegra Di2, I got the good mid-depth wheels. I was curious about because Orbea offers so many options for their bikes. So, okay, let's backtrack. So I thought I was going to like it enough to buy it at the end of this. Like, I had a 2nd generation Orca, thin carbon tubes, really kind of whippy, lightweight. That's the kind of carbon bike that I'm really into. I've got a Time VXRS Ulteam that fits that MO really nicely.
You should also tell people you are a huge Athos lover.
Yeah, I do like the current generation Specialized Athos. Yeah, it's a little whippier than the Tarmac that I own personally. Um, just like a hint of flex. And also, like, I gotta mention, I'm like 130 pounds and 5'6". So like, what feels good to me is probably gonna feel like soup under a lot of people, um, or smashing grapes or whatever. So, anyways, this Orca, the big thing about it that I think is really cool is their Mayo customization program. So above a certain point, you can choose what kind of wheels you want. You can choose your saddle. You can choose how much setback you have. Different bars. You can choose a 1-piece or a 2-piece bar. You can choose bars with different widths. You can choose gearing. You can choose brake rotor sizes. You can choose tires, custom paint. Most of that's
This is
at no extra
available
cost.
in North America, Alvin?
That's worldwide. Yeah.
That's pretty
And
neat.
for the most part, like the custom paint's no extra cost. If you wanted to go with like a bigger cassette or a different crank length, that's no extra cost. If you want to add a power meter, you could do that for a couple $100 usually. Yeah. So they market it as like this super lightweight climbing bike. And I think it's a great climbing bike, but I think that calling it a climbing bike, which is what I kind of went in expecting it to be, does it a bit of a disservice. It's just a really good all-rounder, I would call. Yeah. Just feels really light, stiff. Yeah.
It sounds like you weren't overly blown away by it at the end of the day, though. Why was that?
I've had to reckon with it a little bit. I think most of it's on me at the end of the day. I think this is a perfectly good bike, especially if you're buying it new. It's a great option because the price point is pretty competitive, even in the US, where it's higher apparently than in Europe. But you get all of that customization basically at no extra charge or at a minimal upcharge. And certainly less than if you were to buy the bike and then swap stuff out after. But to answer it, like, maybe it didn't ride like that second generation Orca like I wanted it to again, and I think that's mostly just me, and it doesn't ride quite like the Athos or something like that.
How did it not ride like that? Was it like stiffer or?
Good question. So front end stiffness is a big one. This one is stiffer when you're kind of just like pushing on the bars in like a sprint, when you're just doing this back and forth thing. It's definitely stiffer up front. The handling, and then out back, it feels a little bit stiffer too. Like the Athos, there's just, even for me, like my meager sprint power, like there is like a little bit of give there that you don't necessarily get with the Orca. It's a stiff platform for sure. Yeah, I
wonder how much of that feedback, because you just got off the Factor, which is obviously a much stiffer aero bike.
Yes.
It's obviously a very different thing, but I wonder, like, comparing those two, you got off the Factor, you get on the Orbea, it's not going to feel like that stiff ass Factor, obviously.
No, definitely not when riding. I would probably say like looking at my notes, I would guess that the Orca's front end feels a little bit stiffer. Like I would bet money actually that this one's a little bit stiffer. And that's partially because like Factor, like that Factor is just so narrow.
Yeah.
That like something's got to give there. Whereas this is round tubes and that type of thing.
Yeah.
The Orca is a great bike, but there are also a ton of other all around / lightweight road bikes out there too. So like there's the BMC Team Machine SLR, which I adore that bike. Giant TCR, that's a great bike. There's the Athos. Josh was on the Scott Addict RC, which is like fits the value MO, but for the most part, but it's way lighter, and the Orca frame that I got is light enough that like the weight doesn't make a difference in feel, but
like 700 and something grams, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, and my bike was like just over 15 pounds to be clear with Ultegra Di2. So it's light, but didn't
like that's how much my mountain bike weighs without wheels on it, guys.
There you go. Okay. Is that because of all the dust it's collecting?
I think Alvin touched on something that's really important too that I just want to like call out, is that when we talk about all these bikes and how heavy they are not, it does get to a point where you're like, it kind of doesn't matter. It's talking about a 15-pound bike. Yeah. I mean, that's light.
Yeah, it's light and it felt good and it's great on a descent. There are just a lot of other bikes that kind of strike my fancy a little bit more, and that's just more of like a personal thing. If you are looking for like, I have $7,100 to spend, which is a lot of money, but that's apparently what a lot of our readers at Velo like want to spend on a road bike. Like, this is great because you can get exactly the bike you want out of the box, and most likely it's going to be one of one because you can do the custom paint.
Review for that thing, is it live already, or will it be live
Tomorrow
soon?
morning. It'll be ready
Tomorrow
before
morning.
this podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so it's live right now, everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, we're gonna change directions. We almost couldn't change directions more. We're gonna go from that super lightweight Orbea to a gravel bike that Josh has been riding. Josh, tell me about this weird thing. What's it called, and why is it weird?
So that is the best way to say it. It is odd. It is in terms of bikes that I've ridden, it's more different than I think anything else out there. It's from a company called Priority, and they're out of New York. And the thing about Priority is all of their bikes are belt drive, which I have always loved for commuter bikes, for city bikes. And I actually have one of their city bikes, and it's been amazing. I have used it for so many things and had it for many years, and I love it. So they reached out and they said, hey, we have this new thing that has the gearbox in it, the pinion, and it's belt drive, and you can get it in aluminum or tie. And you want to check it out. And so it's we're going to go from a 15-pound bike to like 30 pounds. It's like, it is heavy. And for me, the biggest thing, like I had to really wrap my head around, like, okay, what am I testing? Because when I do tests, I really want to put myself into, I don't want to, I've seen people go like, oh, I took this road bike on Unbound and it didn't work well. And I'm like, yeah.
Surprise.
Like, surprise. So like, I really want to get into the head of the designers and also the expected consumer, and like, what is this bike? And then does it perform in that way? And that has been a little bit of a challenge for me to switch gears, to go from something like what Alvin is talking about to really understand this Priority bike. And it's not actually quite 30 pounds. It's like 27 or something.
50.
I forget exactly. It's heavy enough that you notice it. But and then the shifting is like, so the pinion gearbox, it's not like Di2 quick. It is not like fast shifting. Yeah.
What does the shifter look like? How are you shifting?
It's a TRP shifter. It's a drop bar shifter, and it looks more or less like any of the other shifters. I'm trying to think. It reminds me a lot. It actually reminds me a lot of Shimano. It's only on the right hand, because it's one by, or it's not really one by, but it is. Or,
how many gears? What's the range?
So the range is huge. It's like, I want to say 530%. It's really big range.
Wow, that's like mountain bike stuff.
Yeah, it's really, and that's part of the thing about it. So I think the first thing I really had to understand, who is it for? And I think there's basically it's bomb proof. You do charge it. It is electronic shifting, but there's nothing as external, and there's a belt drive. So you don't have to do anything to it. And so I think what it's really like ideal for is like, you ride to and from work every day, and then on the weekend, maybe sometimes you want to go bike packing or something like that, or you want to just screw around on the gravel, and it's not like, every bike is a race bike if you want it to be, but it's not a race bike. This is like, just cruise, enjoy. When I get home from a wet winter ride in Portland, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to think about it. Nothing's going to rust. It's fine. And there's this huge range. So that's where I see it.
I am looking forward to hearing about how it feels to ride. I don't want you to talk about it now. You're gonna do a review in the near future, but some of the stuff that I would like to hear about is like what that belt feels like once it gets covered in grime and mud, shifting under power, things like that. So we'll revisit that once the review is live on the Velo website. Yeah. Guys, are you ready to be a bit negative and tell me about your worst rides ever and how you turned it around? Last week, we did the positive thing. Alvin went to freaking South America and climbed some huge climb on a custom steel bike. Will went to Europe and got to ride a bunch of sectors of the Paris-Roubaix, which it sounds horrible to me, but it was his dream. He got to do it, and he said he had fun. He said he enjoyed it. Josh, just before we get into our most challenging rides, off the top of your head, do you have a ride of 2024 that really sticks out to you as your favorite, as your best ride?
Absolutely. And I'm so happy.
Tell me
you
a little
asked
bit
'cause
about
I'm
it.
like, I missed out.
Yeah.
The Tracker 360. I went to Spain to test the new Colnago gravel bike, and they launched it during the Tracker, and I could have done any distance, but me being me, I right away wanted to do the 360, and it was an absolutely amazing ride. It wasn't easy necessarily, but it was amazing. There were so many great things that I could talk about in that ride, and it was just...
It looks absolutely very difficult and extremely beautiful as well, too. Do you guys know there's a YouTuber, Fernwee? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he made a video of the Tracker, and this is when I was just getting interested in riding my bike for way too long. And I watched this video, and like, to me, it looks like you guys are riding on another planet for some of it. There's a lot of sand and stuff. Did you finish the ride and you were happy with how it went?
You're talking about Badlands. That's the one with the sand.
Yeah, okay.
But the Tracker is also incredibly beautiful. They happen at different times in the year. The Tracker is kind of in springish time, and Badlands is at the end. And I'll take a moment to say that Fernwee's videos about Badlands are like
incredible,
some of the best on YouTube. They're so good.
Yeah.
And I've talked to him a little bit. I tried to do some big things with him, but we couldn't quite match it up. But the Tracker. So the Tracker took me, I don't know. I finished at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it goes. It starts in the city, and then you go out, and you eventually. One of the things that sticks in my mind is climbing up to the ridge that overlooks. It's like right at the ocean, and you've been riding all day. It's like I actually walked a good portion of that just because it was like bumpy, and I didn't want to fall over because I was so tired. You climb up to the top, and you look out, and there's the Mediterranean on your left, and there is like all of Spain on your right, and it's just incredible. And then
sounds amazing.
At some point after that, I met up with I went to a grocery store and was like, I don't speak Spanish, and I'm like, I need a sandwich, and they're like, well, do you want this and do you want that? And like, we're working with some woman who was knew both, and she just helped me. And I'm like, anything, just put food on in my hands, anything.
Yeah.
And then I ended up riding with this guy who I want to say he was like 70, and he was on a mountain bike, a hardtail mountain bike. And he was a little slower than me in the flats, but like we just traded off, and we spent hours together until descending like the last big climbs in the dark. He was just gone.
Okay, so that was your best ride.
That was my
What
best ride.
What about your experience, Josh, at something called the Swift Summit 500? I think you wrote that for a component, a SRAM group release or something, but didn't go
yes
well.
And no. So that's a local. So the Swiss Summit in general, there's a bunch of different lengths of it. But the Swiss Summit it happens a few hours south of me in Oregon. It's a fairly small race. It's not like a big deal. And I've done the Swift Summit 200 before, and it was like a really amazing experience, really positive. I met some cool people that I still talk to. And the creator of that race, he reached out to me this year and said, hey, would you be interested in a 500K version of that? And I was like, absolutely. Like, no doubt I will be there. And I did not finish, so it's tricky because I think Alvin will talk about this a little bit too, that I don't like my rides in general, I'm very cautious and I plan pretty well. And for the most part, like by the time I've gotten to a big ride that I would call really bad or not, like that has the possibility of going really bad, I have set everything up very carefully so that it's usually pretty positive. And so this was not a negative experience per se. Like it's upsetting to me because I didn't finish. And here's the thing, as we talked about earlier, like I am very like average. Yes, I ride long distances, but like I'm not super fast or anything. I'm not like, extraordinary. And so for me, it is basically impossible to win a race. And the thing about this race, the first time there were like 5 people, and I could have won this. Yeah, I could have, and in fact, I would have. There were 2 people that were much faster than me, and 1 woman that was slower than me, and the 2 people that were faster than me, and I actually knew one of them. His name is Alex, I think, and he does like Red Hook stuff, and he wasn't riding a fixie for this one, but when I did the 200 with him, he rode like a big old flat bar fixie and had to walk down the descents. And so I knew he was super fast, and sure enough. But he had a hard time like maintaining that, which is unusual for him. But if I had just kept trucking, I have that tattoo that says just pedal. If I had just pedaled, I would have won, and I didn't.
We need to zoom in a bit here. So where did it go south, and why didn't you just keep pedaling?
Yeah, so it really went south so this was the first time that the way they set up the race was that there's a hill climb that happens on Friday night, and then the race happens on Saturday for the 100 and 200 people. And the creator of the race, he said, hey, why don't you come out? We'll get you started at the hill climb, and you'll just ride through the night, and then you'll finish with like the 200 people the next day. So I just like did my regular work, and I worked all day, and then I drove down to the race. I had gotten up at like 7:30 in the morning and worked all day and driven down to the race. And then I actually made the start line with 15 seconds to spare because I just like sort of messed up, like
very casual, relaxed
in the car. And like, so I just like, and where my car was like a few miles from the start line. So I was like doing a time trial to get to the start line. And then I got to the start line and just started riding. And here's the thing that I didn't really understand. I remember in my 20s when I was like, yeah, man, let's just drink all night and like just go to work the next day. No problem. Yeah. By like 5 a.m., I was like, oh my God, I can't keep my eyes open. And then when the sun came up.
How long had you been riding at that point?
So from 7 a.m. just to make things easier. So I've been riding for 12 hours. And at that point, but I had been awake for 24. And that's the part I didn't think about, is like how hard that would be and how profound the sleep deprivation would be. And there was no reason. We even went past to the car, and we all stopped at the car, and there was no reason that I couldn't have just slept in my car for an hour and then kept pedaling. And I would have won if I had done that. Yeah. And then the other thing, I want to just take the opportunity to say this because when I did a video about the ride, I talked about, there was this whole section where I didn't know if I was actually racing against the woman because like, I'm sorry, I forget her name, but are we in different classes or the same class? I didn't really know. And either is totally fine with me, but I stopped to mess with my cleat at one point and she passed me. And this was like super early, like 50 miles into the ride. And I was like, oh my God, like I don't want to come in absolute last. So like if I can just pass one person. And that right there was such a dumb mistake. I should have caught up to her because I was able to catch up to her without too much difficulty. But I should have caught up to her and said, hey, Liz is I think her name. Liz, let's hang out and ride together. And it didn't matter if we were competing or not. We could work that out. Like, this is a long race. And I didn't like grasp just how long it was. And we could have ridden through the night. And she ended up scratching in the middle of the night because, let's be honest, this was rural Oregon and she was scared. And she said it. She was like, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel safe. And I could have just ridden with her and she probably would have been able to continue. And I probably would have been able to been riding a little slower, problem solving better. Like, it's just, I would have had a person. And it was like, that was like the second mistake. Number one, not getting ready for the race. This mistake number two, not like riding with Liz. Mistake number three, not utilizing the car. I could have had different clothes. I could have like slept there a little while. Like,
Yeah.
it's just all silly problem solving stuff that like, if I did it today, I would know. And I just didn't.
I like to say, I've always said to myself that for every hour I ride, I lose 10 IQ points. And I just get dumber and dumber as the ride goes on. And we talked a little bit last week about a long training ride that I did through the night. And, you know, I explained how I put all this clothing on at the bottom of a huge climb, steep climb, like maximum effort kind of climb. And I had put on like things that hold the sweat in, things that I would wear if it was like -10. And, you know, I know that's not how you do it. And in hindsight, I'm looking at myself and like, how stupid am I? You know, but like, it's exactly like you said. Once you get deep into these things, everything changes. You know, it's a bit of a different experience. Just before we move to Alvin, I want to know, can you describe to me what it's like for the people listening that haven't had to try to stay awake while riding a bicycle? Because that's like a completely foreign feeling to a very large majority of people. What's that like?
Yeah. It was like, so I have talked to friends who had like hallucinations in these situations. I don't know if I didn't get there or if I like what, but I didn't have hallucinations. But what did happen was I just was unwilling to, not only was I unable to problem solve, I became unwilling to problem solve. I got to this point where I just don't care about anything. I can barely like function, and like, why am I doing this? And like, I couldn't reach for the inspiration. I couldn't think ahead to like, hey, it's okay if you're an hour slower. You'll still, like, in this case, win, but even just finish. And I will say after I scratched and then ended up driving home, one, I was sitting in a chair before I drove home, and Ira Ryan, who is a semi-famous frame builder in Oregon, Portland, he walked up to me. I didn't realize who he was, and he's like, wow, you look like you've been through some things. And I was like, yeah. and then after that, I got in the car, still having not slept, and nearly fell asleep, went into the other lane, like, and I was like, oh, I gotta like pull over. And like, that's the level of like, that's where I was. I couldn't, like, I was just unfunctional.
Yeah. You know, you would know those things. Isn't that funny? Like, you would know not to get in your car and drive when you're that tired. But it's how I described it to people. It's like, Alvin, it's like a mental bonk. It's not a physical bonk. It's like a mental bonk. It's like my brain is like my quad muscle and it's seized.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've done my fair share of like ultras and in distance too. And like the last one that I successfully did, that was like 500K, and I rode through the night. Like, I slept for an hour after I finished, and then I decided to drive 4 hours back to San Antonio. And that's something you should never do. Talking about the low IQ thing. I mean, I'm of the mindset that just about anybody, if you can ride 50 miles, you can do something like this, which is a huge leap, I think, to think of. And it is a huge leap, but it's also a question of pain tolerance and understanding how your body reacts to those things. So if you were to have asked me, Josh, because I've done this a bunch of times ahead of time, not to be that guy, and Levy, you've done this too. You got to ride through the night because everybody reacts differently in those situations, and everybody, like, you got to know like what sounds kind of freak you out and be able to diffuse those sounds the next time you go out to say like, oh, that's not a bunch of coyotes chasing me.
Dude,
like,
I was shocked
just
at how different it is.
Yeah.
You know, it was, I know I said this last podcast, but we need to do like some sort of team building bullshit thing where we all get together and ride, like do some stupid 500K thing, you know, and we each like talk about our experience together. I think that would be sick.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I will say, I just because I'm vain, I will say I have ridden through the night a fair bit, and definitely in the night, like a lot. And I did fine riding in the night on this thing. There were some little things that, like clothing, that I could have adjusted, but it wasn't that. It was actually because I knew when the sun came up, I'm going to feel better. And you know what happened when the sun came up? I didn't feel better. I felt just as bad.
You didn't have the rebirth that we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah. So that was what. And also to go back to when I said that I plan and I'm like, don't generally have bad rides because I plan so carefully, that was actually a detriment here. I planned so carefully into such a box that I couldn't get out of it when I needed to. I couldn't pivot.
It's funny. Yes. Yeah. You know, you say that, and like I think back to I'm going to tell my story after Alvin, and you know that's sort of also what happened to me. Like I feel like if I had just been smarter and more flexible about my planning, you know what I mean? I could have just chilled out and I would have rode the thing with my buddy, but I didn't. We'll get there, but that does feel like what happened.
I want to hear about it. Don't tease us. Just go for it.
Please. No. We're going to end with me shitting in the bush. First, Alvin.
Oh, great.
Everybody stay tuned.
And go, Alvin.
Alvin, you were telling me about a ride at some point where you had a load of different mechanicals. What happened?
Yeah, I should preface by saying I've had shitty rides. I've had terrible crashes, had terrible mechanicals in my lifetime. 2024, great year for riding bikes for this guy right here, for Alvin Holbrook.
Good to hear.
Yeah. And I mean, the real issue was that I was on Factor Ostro Vam, bike that we just talked about, long-termer. Stock tires are not tubeless ready on an $11,000 bike. They're just the standard Goodyear tube type, which is, it's a fine tire, but it's a weird oversight, I think. And if you were to buy the bike and hold on to it, that's the first thing I would replace. Anyways, I got 3 flats over like a 30-mile ride. I usually carry 2 tubes with me. At this time, I was carrying some AliExpress TPU tubes that I had purchased because I just wanted to try them out. They seemed like they were holding air. Pretty sure they were holding air because I got flats in different places and it wasn't along the sidewall or anything like that, or the bead.
What caused the flats? And where were you?
So I was like 25 miles away from my house here in Walnut Creek, California. So I'll leave it there. But I was heading towards, if you're familiar with the topography of the area, there's a ride called Three Bears. It's in the mountains, hills between Berkeley and Walnut Creek area. And in there, you're going to find some pig farms, some cow farms, a bunch of like vineyards, that type of thing. And I happen to be in probably the most remote part of that ride, which like 10 miles away from town, but I also didn't have cell phone service somehow on this third flat. And I just started walking because I was like, okay, I know that there is this ranch house / like vineyard like
walk
a mile
of shame
away.
In your road shoes, wearing your spandex.
Yeah, exactly, with the expensive bike by my side and that type of thing. So I'm walking for 15 minutes. I should mention I could not repair the TPU tube. I had patches for it, but none of them were holding air.
They're really hard to repair.
Yeah,
I've even good ones, like I've tried.
yeah. Even the
Kind of,
Tubolito
but
tubes,
yeah,
like
they're
you
really hard.
can't really do it. Anyways, I get to this place. There's a huge sign that says no soliciting. There's no cars in the driveway or anything like that. I can't see a way to get in, and I'm just like, okay, I've hitchhiked on my bike before. If I need to, I will do that again. I am a small Asian-looking man. I hope that I am not particularly intimidating.
I love this picture that's being painted in my mind right now of a 130-pound Alvin dressed in spandex, just sauntering up to this ranch house.
Yeah, in a purple jersey and gray bibs, like looking pretty good on an expensive flashy bike.
With the purple bike.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm looking for Wi-Fi at this point. I'm just like, okay, maybe I can hop on the Wi-Fi. They have unlocked Wi-Fi. Incredible. I hop on that Wi-Fi. I hit up Uber immediately. 20 minutes, I'm out of there. Yeah. And so and then the fun part of that is that the driver was from Eritrea, and this is right after the Tour de France, and he was familiar with Bidiam Girmay, the Eritrean sprinter that like took a bunch of stages, and he was stoked. It was his first like.
I don't know what half the words you just said mean, to be honest, but that sounds great.
So if my geography serves correctly, East African sprinter. Early on, one of the first prominent like sprinters to win several stages from Africa. So that was cool. I got an Uber to where my wife was working. We got in the car and we got some chicken strips. So all is good.
Good then for you, didn't Alvin? I am pleased that your worst ride, like that was your worst ride of 20. It sounds like you had an amazing 2024.
I'm generally a pretty positive person. If I'm
We'll change that here.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm not particularly I'm a little bit jaded about the cycling industry, but
yeah. I
try
half
to
expected your worst ride because you spent a bunch of time riding in Texas. So I half expected your worst ride to be like, you wait on the boonies, and I know it's cliche, but like getting harassed by like, I don't know, like farm guys, farm people or something, ranch people.
I've done a lot of riding in the boonies irresponsibly on my own in Texas and as well as in California. And in those rural areas, if anything, I would say like pound for pound, Texas is more giving. Like the Texans are nicer. Those ranch trucks, those farm trucks, they give you a ton of space on the side of the road. They're not going very fast. The issue is once you get into the more suburban areas and you're getting kind of the brodozery type or like folks rolling coal, that's when it gets really bad. And also like, it's also like where I was in like South Texas in San Antonio area, like lots of dogs hanging out that love to chase you and will bite you down.
Lots of sprint practice.
Yeah. I unfortunately had to like kick a dog in the nose after I got bit on my shoe and stuff. I was like,
you got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunate to that dog, and I think I'm assuming the dog was fine, but yeah, none of those issues. If anything, like I've like actually hitchhiked several times in Texas. Like those folks, very nice. Just don't bring up any politics or thoughts on guns.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. My story is slightly more dramatic, unfortunately for me.
Please. Can't wait for the grand conclusion in the bush.
So last week we talked about the best rides, and my best ride was that training ride that I did. Big, long thing, went really well, blah, blah, blah. And it turned out my best ride of 2024 was actually training for one of my worst or most challenging rides of 2024, which was a bike packing race that I had planned for months, like basically almost a year. Lots of training. I got a coach. I bought a bunch of tail fin bags and like expensive fancy gear that I probably didn't need, which is half the fun of it. And then I had my, it starts in Merritt. So I had to get to Merritt, and I drove there with my buddy, Derek. And this thing's 1,000 kilometers long, and I felt like very confident about it, which is probably part of the problem. And so the day before, another buddy got to drive out there with us, and he had, I think it's because he had these like weird sugar cakes, and I ended up eating like, I don't know, 8 of them or something. They're like Colombian cakes I'd never had before, but they were really good. And then we went out for dinner, and I'm going to burn 6 million calories over the next like 60 hours or however long this is going to take me. So I was eating like all the things. I had a big slab of cheesecake for dessert. I had some bites of my buddy's cheesecake. I had like a meal and a half. I'm eating all the things, and I usually don't have any troubles. We spend the night in the hotel. 4 a.m. It's not my alarm that wakes me up. It's my stomach. And I will say that like I'm a bit of a basket case, which is probably a story in itself. Like I can get myself, I think, like fairly worked up and nervous enough and anxious enough that I do think that I can like I think your mental state has an effect on your physical state. Sometimes, a lot of times. So I don't want to blame it on the cakes that Owen gave me 100%. Because it might just be because I'm a crazy person. Anyway, so I woke up bad belly feeling, and it didn't go away all morning. I tried to like do all my morning things that I had planned anyway, did the things, starts at 7 a.m. We ride over there. Belly's not going good. We start pedaling, and my plan, I like to be sport. I know this was a long 1,000-kilometer thing, but I like to be sporty-ish, and people went off, people that are going to beat me by like a day or something. But I wanted to ride quicker at first for a little while. And because I am an absolute idiot, I have a power meter. I can see I'm an idiot. It's flashing. Idiot, idiot, idiot at me. Idiot, slow down. I rode way too hard for like 10 or 12, the first 10 or 12 hours. And because my belly never got better, I wasn't eating it. I didn't eat any bike food. I barely drank anything. I know how things work, and this
Been
is
there in
I don't know.
spot before.
I don't know what I was doing,
So
dude.
silly.
And like, yeah, and I had these delicious like blueberry rice cake things and I stopped a whole bunch. I like to smoke a little bit when I'm riding long distances, and I stop, like I eat a rice cake thing. Comes right back up. It's not good. along with a bunch of other stuff.
Bad.
Yeah, and like I'm just trying to like stay relaxed. And like I think around hour 12, Derek caught up to me, and I say like, Derek, this is my buddy that I was supposed to be riding with the entire time, and I should have stayed with. Derek, like I'm not feeling so good, and like so we like chill out a bit, and we get to Penticton. I eat 2 Beyond Meat burgers, 2 or 3 apple pies, like an extra large Coke. Like I'm just putting all the things in me. We head out of there. We're on a gravel path out of town that goes by like these beautiful, expensive wineries. Penticton is known for that kind of stuff. Like it's the place like your parents go for the weekend. Like if your parents have a lot of money, they drive their convertible BMW there, and that kind of thing.
You just dated yourself. I'm gonna just say right now.
That sounds like your parents are yuppies, huh?
Yeah. So we head out of town, and we're riding on this gravel path that's like going by these beautiful, expensive wineries. And I'm not good. I'm like behind Derek. I'm like vomiting off the side of the bike, complete strangers so I eventually had to stop. My legs are cramping because I couldn't drink anything. I couldn't make myself drink anything, and nothing was staying in. So I obviously had no energy. So I was mentally broken. So I was literally like sitting on the side of this trail in tears. A lot of that is because I'm disappointed, but I'm also like mentally broken. Like there's nothing it's not just no energy. Anybody that's bonked knows what that means. Complete strangers are like, dude, what's going on with you, and Derek and I eventually part ways. He's got to keep going because it's 9 p.m. now. It's getting dark. We're at the bottom of a 3,000-foot climb. We got to get over in gravel. And like, I can't even move. So I end up finding a hotel. I have to ride back to town. On the way back to town, I know that things are about to come out of the bottom end of me. So I'm like on the side of the trail trying to get my bib shorts out of the way as these like complete strangers, these older like gray blue hair people with their little dog are walking by that are there for like the red wine and the sunsets, and they're seeing this like smelly, disgusting man wearing spandex shitting on the side of the trail, swearing because it's getting all over his bib shorts that he has to pull up. And I got to ride back to the hotel. Anyways, the hotel, what? Oh, dude, it was one of the hardest moments I've ever had, like in life. Not even on a bike. And the hotel was, it was the weekend in Penticton, and like some shit was going on, so there was no vacancies. I find this hotel, $350. The room I got is like, it should have been $50. There was mold everywhere, but I was so happy to pay for it at the time. I spent the entire night on the floor in the bathroom, and then my poor girlfriend had to drive 5 hours to come pick me up, and I was too rough.
I was about to say, like, did you ride in that after? Like,
oh, I couldn't. Like, I was in touch with some people. I was texting some people, you know, and like you want to be positive, and they were being positive, and they're like, oh, dude, like take some hours. You know, there's a lot of people doing this, and it's not about winning. I'm not going to win anything. Like Josh, like you and I are normal people that like to ride our bikes far, but we both know we actually suck in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So, you know, I had some friends convincing me, Coach and Derek texting me like, oh, you know, sleep for 5 hours, eat some food, you know, just keep pedaling, see what happens. But I was so far gone. You know, I had been vomiting and shitting all night long in this like crappy hotel, and I couldn't drive home even. So my girlfriend, 5 hours to pick me up. She had to drive 5 hours. So she spent 10 hours driving that day to get me, as I'm sitting in the passenger seat, just like curled up in a ball. Like, so one of these things that I don't want this to be super negative. I want it to be like what we learned from these rides. So, and the big thing for me is, you know, I need to listen way more. I learned that like, you can't just like, being a meathead actually is the answer for some things, right, Josh? Like a lot of times the answer is
the tricky thing is because sometimes it works. So you convince yourself it always works.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah. And I automatically, when times get difficult, I automatically will go that direction, like meathead direction, because that's how I've always got through or tried to get through things. And, you know, that wasn't the answer was to pedal easy right from the start and to try to slowly take things in and just try to feel better, you know? And the answer wasn't to pedal at all the watts for 12 hours when I can't drink water. Like, how dumb am I? In the end, I got what I deserved.
So often, and I'm sure both of you can understand this, is that so often we decide to do things that people say can't be done, and then you do them. And so I find you have no gauge of reality, because who are you going to ask?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe I could have kept pedaling. I don't know. I couldn't ride a bike for 2 weeks afterwards because my quads and hammies had cramped so bad because I wasn't able to drink any water. So like I literally couldn't swing my leg over a bike to even pedal a bike, let alone if I wanted to. It was fairly rough. So Mike's got some work he has to do on himself in 2025.
That's a miracle that you're here. You still want to talk about bikes, if anything.
Oh, dudes, you have no idea. That's the PG story. Maybe later on in this series we'll get to the really rowdy stories.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Anyways, why don't we end it there? You know, I think that's we'll end it with me shitting in a bush in front of strangers, and we'll see how that goes. Guys, thank you for your stories, and for everybody that's listening, we don't have comments yet, but we would love to hear about your, not the worst, but maybe like let's call it the most difficult stories or most difficult rides of 2024 and what you learned. So tell us on social media. You could tell us on the Velo Instagram channel, or you could tell us on the YouTube channel in the comment section. I think we might have comments on Velo at some point in the future, but they're not here yet. And I'm not going to beg you guys for a good rating, but it'd be nice. It'd be
5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, please.
5 stars, everybody, or
leave
inspired.
Yes, definitely.
Last thing, before I let you guys go, I want to know what you're working on this week. Alvin, what are you typing about?
What am I clicking clacking about? I gotta talk about these bib tights I've been riding in. It's nice and warm here. I've been riding in spring, fall weather bib tights, and I've got good, better, best pricing, and I'm comparing them to whether you need to actually buy these instead of just using arm warmers and leg warmers. Yeah, so that'll be a big thing, and we'll see it early next week, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Sadly, I am not having a discussion about whether warmers versus tights, unfortunately. I wish I was. At some point, I will write about post-Shake Jacket stuff, but for now, what I'm working on is the Maine Outside magazine. They wrote this article in December that was... Now, this is not to disparage them at all. The article was just, speaking to a general audience about some things about salt pills, which is apparently a TikTok trend. I don't know anything about TikTok, but and it was like, yeah, you don't need salt pills and you should eat broccoli. And I was like, that doesn't seem like that works for me, or I'm guessing our Velo audience. So I did some testing with a sweat sensor to show how much I sweat in like an hour or 2 hours. And then I did an interview with a nutritionist or a RDN, I think.
Registered dietitian?
Yeah. And just got some guidelines about salt pills versus not salt pills and all that stuff. So I'm going to write that up.
That is especially relevant to me because I just bought a whole ton of salt capsules off of Amazon.
Nice.
Well,
it could be a story in itself, everybody.
I can't speak to whether that will work or not, but I will give a preview of the article. Is basically, actually, I'll say at the Track It 360, I got really bad cramps at one point, and I did use salt pills, although I don't generally. And that's maybe not a solution to cramps or not. It's hard to know, but
you got to take them before you cramp.
Yeah,
I'm a cramper too.
Well, there's different theories of why you get cramps and how to fix them, but whatever. I was like, anything. So,
yeah. Once you get there.
Yeah, but this article, the reality is that there is nuance, and that's why, not to disparage Outside, because that article was written for one audience. This is going to be for a different audience. But the amount that you sweat in an hour is crazy, and you got to do something.
Yeah, and we all sweat a different amount, and yeah, it's interesting. Some of us aren't cramped. There's all sorts of science behind it, so that'll be interesting. What am I doing? I think if I manage to edit this podcast before the weekends, it'll be a small miracle. So that's all I'm going to do. But next week, guys, I want to talk about gravel suspension. I think that's pretty relevant, and I think that we all live in obviously drastically different places. Alvin, you're in California. Josh, you're in Portland. I'm in Squamish, where it's very different. So we have different opinions about things, and we've all ridden some different stuff. We're going to talk about the RockShox Rudy, the 32 step cast. I've been riding the Cane Creek invert a whole bunch. We're going to talk about old Paris-Roubaix suspension bikes, which are pretty neat. We're going to talk about flexi seat posts, suspension stems, and why
lefties.
Maybe... And we're going to talk about lefties, too.
Yeah, Alvin and I both like lefties, or know about them, I should say.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And also, though, we're going to talk about why you might want to forget all about gravel suspension and just run bigger tires and maybe even some inserts. But that's a conversation for next week. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Watch next week, too, and leave us a 5-star rating. Goodbye.
5 stars.
5 stars. 5 stars. 5 stars.
There you go.